Hi everyone! I hope you are doing well. I am in the studio today actually filming our next sew along project for you guys, and you can see it back there, a little sneak peek. It's going to be a good one, but we are here today to talk about the Frisco skirt. And this is a live Q&A, so if you have questions about the sew along, drop them into the chat and I will try to get to them today. But I also have a few questions already together from some viewers, so we will just kind of jump into that. And again, just a reminder, here's this beautiful thing. I love this skirt. It's still a little bit too chilly in Colorado to wear it, but I am going to wear it all summer long and I cannot wait. First question. Oh, and before we get started, all of the videos for the sew along are in the Frisco skirt playlist on our channel. So a bunch of lessons. You got the introduction, talk about fabrics. We walk you through the whole process. So if you're like, what is the Frisco skirt? Go watch those and then come back and we can help you out with your questions. The first question that we got was, can you make the Frisco skirt in linen or more structured fabrics? And the answer is yes, definitely. My co-host Meg has actually made a linen Frisco as well as a wool Frisco, a lighter wool. So you can absolutely make it with a more structured fabric. It's going to give you a little bit more of a full silhouette since this skirt has a little bit of an A-line to it. So just keep that in mind. Probably if you're going with those more structured fabrics, you don't need to worry about the French seams. You can just serge the raw edges and do a regular seam and probably press those seam allowances open because you don't want the added weight of that French seam, and it's just not necessary for those types of fabrics. Okay, did you have to make any adjustments to the elastic length? And actually I did. I pulled it a little bit tighter. The instructions say to cut it to half your waistline, and I pulled mine a little bit tighter. And I think that largely has to do with where you want to wear the skirt. If you are, I'm a high waist kind of gal, so I wanted to wear it a little bit higher than it's intended at my true waistline. I think it's actually probably meant to ride kind of between your hip and your natural waistline. So just keep that in mind, but it's kind of nice that the skirt is adjustable in that way. Where is the skirt intended to sit? So as I mentioned, it's not at your true waist. It's kind of halfway between your waist and your hips, but you can adjust it to your preference. So you can go either way you'd like. All right. Do you have any tips for buttonholes on drapey fabrics? Yes, I do. Buttonholes are one of my favorite things to do, but I will tell you that this fabric was tricky. And it was totally the fabric. But I think what I would do next time is potentially add a little bit of interfacing along that front self placket where you're going to put those buttonholes, especially if you're working on something that's pretty lightweight. It's just going to give a little bit more structure to that placket, and it's going to be a little bit easier to stitch that thicker buttonhole into it. So try that. I think when I make this again, I'll add a little bit, just a strip of interfacing along that line. I've got a couple more questions to go through, but please chime in if you are making the Frisco skirt and you've run into issues. If you have any questions, drop them in the chat and we will get to them. Next question is, can you do fewer buttons? And one of the things that I had mentioned in the sew along is that, especially again, if you're working on a drapey fabric, you want to pick lightweight buttons because there's quite a few buttons on the original pattern. I believe there are 8, and I actually, how many did I use? 7. So I reduced the number on my skirt here, but those buttons can add a lot of weight to the front of that skirt. So pick lightweight buttons to start, and absolutely you can do fewer buttons. You just want to space them out. You could stop them above that lower hem, and you'll get a little bit more flare, a little bit more open as you move in the skirt. Just make sure that you are you're comfortable. Whatever you're comfortable with, you can use for this skirt. I'd say that there's probably a max that you don't want to space those buttons out more than 3.5 to 4 inches, because it could potentially create some gaping, which you don't want in a skirt. So you kind of don't want in anything, but especially a skirt. So, but play around with it, and mostly just keep in mind lighter weight buttons are better. But you also have flexibility on the size of those buttons. It's really, there's a lot that's up to you with this skirt pattern. Can you share your tips for the hem? And yes, I can. This is again, it really comes down to the fabric that you're working with, how difficult this skirt is going to be to make. It's not a complicated skirt, but if you're using a fabric that's drapier, it's going to make it a little bit more complicated. But I kind of like that because this is a good skirt to practice some of those techniques, those French seams, hemming on those drapey fabrics. The other thing that adds to the difficulty level here is that the bottom hem of the skirt has a slight curve to it, and that can definitely, it's hard to see, there you can kind of see it, but it definitely makes it a little bit harder to hem. And what I would do if you're having any trouble at all hemming, what I would do is sew a basting stitch around the bottom edge of the skirt where you want your hemline to be, and then use that basting stitch to press. It's kind of your pressing guide, and then you can turn that raw edge under. But that's probably my favorite technique when you're working on a curved hem of any kind, is that initial basting stitch. And you can either, the idea is that you remove it after you do the final hem, but sometimes I leave it in. That's my secret. So again, basting stitch right along where you want that hemline to be, and then fold up from there. And that stitch will give you a nice guide to get a nice clean edge there. All right, let me just check our feed to see if we've got any more questions coming in. Not yet? Okay, don't be shy. Here to help. Got a question about stressed buttonholes on the waistband. And I think this can happen, especially if you have pulled your elastic a little bit more tight. It's going to stress that waistband a little bit more in the front. And that's why I do recommend, and the pattern includes the recommendation to use some interfacing on that waistband just to give it a little bit more strength. But it is true that there is going to be some stress on these buttons. So my tip is that try your skirt on. If you can actually put it on without undoing these buttons, I would just stitch along here and close this placket at the waistband. It's a half elastic waistband structure, so there's a good bit of give in the back. Just test it out, see if you can do that, and then consider sewing those in place, because I found that I can slip this on over my hips. But otherwise, just make sure that you've used some nice interfacing here, and that should help with that stress there. But it is kind of the nature of the skirt with a button waistband. It's going to have a little bit of stress on it. All right, let's wait and see. Any other questions coming in? Lots of design options with this one. I'm super excited to try adding a little ruffle band to the bottom. When I did this sew along, I added a little bit of length. I think Meg's linen version is even longer, and it looks really nice. I really like that longer wrap skirt look. But you could even go shorter for more of a spring look as well. So many directions you could head here. Looks like we don't have too many questions coming in. If you find that you have a question that we didn't answer today, feel free to add it to any one of the lessons. Add it here, and I will keep a lookout and try to address those as they come in. But we're really hoping this is a nice, relatively easy and fun sew for you. And again, we're here to help with the Frisco skirt sew along. So let us know how we can help. All right. I'm going to sign off for today. Thanks for everyone who sent in questions. Keep them coming. Y'all have a lovely day.